I'm Karen Eager. I'm a reporter with the South Berwick Reporter, and we'd like to welcome you and thank you for coming tonight and for your support all year long as readers and as donors and as sponsors for the Reporter so that we can bring this local news to you. We really appreciate your support. I'd like to thank Spring Hill. They let us have the use of this room tonight for free. It's very generous of them. And Bill Rogers has donated his time to tape our program tonight. Rachel Martin helped us with organizing. We have some wonderful sponsors: Affinity Salon, Village Motors, Fabulous Find, Great Northern Builders, Reed Custom Soil, the Maine Community Foundation and the Nine Wickets Fund, and 85 individual donors to our effort. So that's pretty good. So the Reporter's Year consisted of 169 news stories. That's a little more than 3 a week. 564 people subscribed to our free email, and events calendar is rolling out soon. Trish has been demonstrating it over there, and it's not quite ready, but we hope that you'll take the opportunity once it goes live to put your activities and events into the calendar. It can be a true community calendar for the community, something we have never had, where all people can put everything in one place and we can find out what's happening in town. I think it'll also be handy when you schedule an event to know what else is happening. We have 2 new reporters that we added this year, Jesse Romans and Noreen Beal. And all of the team has donated 2,500 hours of their time to bring the news to you. Which brings us to introducing the South Berwick Reporter team. And we're going to do this by having all of us come up and line up here. So if everybody, you shouldn't sit down, Trish. Get up, come up here. And I thought it would be interesting for us to answer a question tonight about our first year publishing the Reporter. And we're going to have everybody say their role. And we're missing a few people. Nora Irvin was unable to make it tonight, and Mary Elizabeth Everett, one of our reporters. Is Jesse here either? Jesse's here. Jesse's not here. Okay, so a couple of us didn't make it. But I asked everybody to answer a couple questions tonight. And the question that we're going to start with is, what surprised you about volunteering for the Reporter? I'm going to start with you, John. You're there.
This is meant as a compliment. What has surprised me the most has been the professionalism of the operation. Everybody in here is really working like a newspaper, and that's just blown my mind. That's all.
I'll answer the same.
Say your role too, for
I'm
anybody
John
who doesn't
Klausner.
know.
I draw cartoons.
Yay.
Original cartoons.
Sometimes.
I agree with the professionalism. I'm Noreen Beal, and I think the dedication that everyone shows and how we all seem to get along together, which is good. Thank you.
And Noreen does police.
Yeah, I do police, yeah. Not sure what to say about that, but go ahead.
And I'm Amy Miller, and I do mostly editing. And what surprised me is just seeing everybody who came on board and how, whether they used to be reporters or had never been reporters, how fulfilling everybody found it to actually be covering news in town.
I'm surprised that all of these busy people who some of them are still working at jobs, have stuck with it, and we've gone through a whole year of producing a pretty good product with these very busy people's time.
I'm surprised to find out how much fun it still is. And it's just been wonderful to work with former colleagues and new ones, and it's really, I'm also surprised about how much I've learned about our town, even though I've lived here half of my life, more than half.
I'm Susie Burke, and I do the town council and some other things, as we all do multiple things. But I have to echo what other people have said. It's been remarkable to be with this group of people, and I learn something all the time. I've done other kinds of writing, but I've never been a reporter. So to get the tips from our editors and from the other people, and just to see what they do and what they produce, I'm just always learning something. So that's been wonderful. And I'm grateful for that.
I'm Mark Pachenik. My original background was in journalism, and for the past 6 years I've been reporting for Seacoast Online about the town council and the school board. And that ended, and I missed it. And I missed that team environment. And now it's back, and I'm grateful for that. And to be part of this endeavor is really special to me.
Trish, did you want to say something?
You told me to sit down.
No, I told you to, don't sit down.
Sit down.
Don't sit down.
You can sit down for it. I'm thinking,
Sorry, I'm Trish English. I do the tech stuff. A year ago, my husband Mark, we were in the kitchen, and I had just retired from my IT life, and Mark was on a Zoom meeting with the reporter people, and he holds up this little scrawled piece of paper, scrawled writing. Do you want to help with the tech stuff? And I just kind of rolled my eyes. And I sat down and I saw 9 little Hollywood squares. And the only person I didn't know from years and years was Zelda. And I just wrote a love, of course, Zelda. These were all people who have been involved in the community for decades, right? So I thought, all right. And an hour later, I get an email. Amy's made me webmaster. But it takes a village, and just watching the dedication of all these folks, they work so hard, and nobody ever complains. They just do it. And watching the focus, so I'm not a journalist, but watching the focus that they have on non-biased, nonprofit, all-inclusive, community-minded has just blown me away. So happy to be part of the group.
Our second question is, why are you volunteering your time to the reporter?
You shouldn't ask the cartoonist first. I ask myself that a lot, yes. I read a disgusting amount of media, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with the term news desert, and it's one of the major issues post-election wise in our world right now, is that there's huge sections of the country that have no coverage whatsoever. And just little things like what's going on in the school board, what's going on at the police station, the things that go on in a community. So why am I interested? And so there's a lot of different voices in media. I get really upset when people disparage media as one whole body. Media is a lot of different things. There's, webmasters, especially now. There's cartoonists. There's editorials. So I was really happy to be another voice in this project. It's been a pretty impressive project. That's all. Sorry.
Okay,
Sorry.
no, okay. Okay, well, the reason I do this is when I was about 12, or 10, 12, my dad I lived in Niagara Falls, New York, And he used to take the Niagara Falls Gazette, open it up, and start telling me, this is what you should do, this is what you should do. I don't like this guy, I don't like this guy. And so I started paying attention to the news. And at 12, I didn't complain. I really didn't. But as I grew older, I did. And then when I was about 17, I had already joined the high school newspaper staff. And then I became editor of the high school newspaper staff at 17. And so they sent me to a conference, and it was held in Fredonia, New York. And one of the guest speakers was Pierre Salinger. So it tells you how old I am. Anyway, I was enthralled by the idea of becoming a press secretary. I thought, what a cool job is that? And then after a while, he talked about the New York Times. Well, maybe I'll be a reporter for the New York Times. That was a good idea. None of that happened. I did some other things along the way, and this is just one more, and I love what I'm doing.
Well, this is very touching. I'm really liking listening to everybody. But I just think real, honest information is very important, and every day we see why and how.
I worked for 40 years in public libraries where my job was to get free access for whatever people needed. And I love that job, and I see this job of bringing a service of free local news as the same, having the same kind of importance as public library service. And it's challenging and meaningful to me, and this is how I want to spend my retirement.
Well, I've always thought that there was a great deal of need for local news and community journalism, and a informed community is, information is power. And if you are informed, you have the power to make a change. And as John said, the changes in journalism in the past few years and the news deserts and everything, and I think we were all feeling this. I spoke to Nora at an election a couple years ago, and she said she and Amy and some others were talking about it. We had all worked together at Foster's, and so I thought, well, I'm on board because I want to know what's going on in town, and I think other people do too, so that's why I stay with it.
I feel similarly. I was thinking about the fact that I do not only work with this group, I benefit from everything that everybody does. I'm a consumer of all this too, and I learn so much. And I think it's important work, and it feels like it's our little pebble in the pond that, as we work towards an informed citizenry, which is so important. And it's really good work. I'm very grateful.
In a former life, I worked for a town in a couple of different capacities, and I know, we hear what's happening internationally, nationally, even in terms of the state, but we don't have enough local news. And that's really what most affects all of us. The decisions that are being made by the town council, or the work that's being done by the different people employed by the town or volunteering for the town. And it's really important that we have that insight because, as has been said, information is power, but also it gives you more of a connection with your neighbors and with your town. And in an era where there's a lot of isolation, I think having that connection is really important.
I like Karen's words, challenging and meaningful. Definitely meaningful and definitely challenging. The website, through generous sponsors, I was talking to Brandon earlier, he provided the seed money for the website. It's pretty complex, and it's got a lot of stuff, and that's why it's so beautiful. It's a lot to maintain, so we're going to be reaching out, little plug, appeal for volunteer tech people who want to be part of the team, and we're trying to make it as simple as possible so we can have a team. But, you know, if you love technology, boy, it is fun and it's challenging. And come take a look over, you know, later on at the calendar that's about to go live, and that's also through sponsorship. You'll be able to submit your events, community events, free. And so we're really hoping for, it's exciting, just moving forward. So.
All right, well, that's us. And Amy's going to introduce our speaker.
Many years ago, I worked at the Worcester Telegram, and I met another young reporter, so you know how many years ago, named Bill Ballou. And he told me his dream. He was working in one of the bureaus. We weren't in the main Worcester office. But he told me one of his dreams was to be a Red Sox reporter. And a few years later, I saw that he had become the Worcester Telegram's Red Sox reporter. And since then, he's covered the Red Sox for decades, but apparently also played a role in getting the Red Sox, is it called a farm team?
AAA farm team, yes.
AAA farm team to Worcester from somewhere in Rhode Island. Pawtucket, Rhode Island. And he votes on the Hall of Fame baseball players and is involved in the baseball research organization. SABR, yes, that. And agreed to come up here and talk about being a Red Sox reporter and about local news, because that's where we originally met. So it's really fun. We haven't seen each other in decades, but it's kind of like we have. So thank you, Bill, for being willing to come up from Whitensville.
So thanks, Amy. It's interesting how the landscape of the news media and newspapers have changed. Amy worked in Gardner for the Worcester Telegram. I worked in Clinton for the Worcester Telegram. And we covered those towns extensively. Both towns also had daily newspapers of their own. I mean, you know, everything was covered, and now nothing is covered. I think today, because I still subscribe online to the Telegram because out of loyalty, because they gave me a good living and I had a lot of good times. I think the Telegram and Gazette's main goal in life today is to make sure nobody knows what's going on. That's the problem. I had a question. Who's the librarian? Karen. Well, Karen. As I've gone through life, I'm 72 now. I'm not afraid to admit it. I'll be 73 next month. I've always, and I do a lot of research. I love history. Baseball's a great history sport, but I love history in general. And I found that two professions, the people involved in those professions are always in good moods. One are librarians, and the other are plumbers. And so are there any plumbers here tonight? All right. Why are librarians always in good moods? I've never met an unpleasant librarian in 50-something years. What's the answer?
They're surrounded by books.
That's a good answer. That is a good answer. I just at Marlborough, Mass. Library yesterday, and they could not have been more accommodating and glad to help me. I love going to libraries. Massachusetts mostly, but when I was on the road to the Red Sox, I would go into the New York City Library. I went to the Toronto Library. I'd go to libraries because you can stay there forever. Eventually, you have to go to the game and do what they pay you to do. But you know, that was a lot of fun. So I have, as I said, I've been around a long time. I have lots and lots of things I could talk about. How many people here are baseball fans? All right. And how many came for the maple sugar pie? There you go. I like honesty. That's very good. But anyway, as Amy mentioned, I do vote for the Baseball Hall of Fame, and I have since 1997. And my vote is due this month. I have brought along a copy. Actually, this is the actual Baseball Hall of Fame ballot. Wow. So if anybody wants to see it, you're welcome to come up afterwards and look at it. It's not fancy. And of all the things I have done in sports, voting for the Baseball Hall of Fame is the most controversial because I'm a hard marker. I think you have to be great, just great to be in the Baseball Hall of Fame. And fans and players, they feel like it should be rewarded for being a nice guy. Well, that's not how sports works. Last year, and I get some incredible emails. Last year, I did not vote for Adrian Beltre of the Texas Rangers, who was got a lot of votes and got in the Hall of Fame. And I always write about my vote because people have a right to know what I'm thinking, because this is important to the fans and to the players. And so they have a right to know. And I got an email back from a guy from Texas, where Adrian Beltre played most of his career. And it started off, "Dear Mr. Ballou," which is a good start. Some of them don't start that nicely. "Dear Mr. Ballou, I totally disagree with your decision that your belief that Adrian Beltre does not belong in the Hall of Fame, and I hope you change your vote. However, I admire your courage for having the, I admire you for having the courage to publicly admit just how stupid you are. So I'm not sure how to go with that. I mean, it's half and half. Well, I'll start with, in these things, I've done a lot of things. I love, well, I've never had, I have covered a lot of dull baseball games. I've never had a dull night in the press box. I love being around journalists. They're fascinating people. They're opinionated, they're intelligent, they're almost always wrong if they disagree with me, but it's never dull. I loved being in press boxes through the years. I never get tired of that. I get tired of all the rigmarole that went with covering the Red Sox with TV and this and that. I never get tired of being with my friends in the press box, and that didn't matter where I was. The other great thing about being a sports writer, and it's reflected here tonight, I almost never had to pay for a meal. It's just fabulous, and I'm glad, once again, I'm eating for free. So this keeps the streak alive, even though I'm not an active baseball writer. Talking about community journalism, which is dear to my heart. One of my favorite stories about how the world has changed, and this is a long, long time ago. My best friend, the guy who was the best man at my wedding, and by coincidence, my wife and I got married on October 11th, 1975. Anyone remember what that date is? No. First day of the 1975 World Series, the Red Sox were in. And back in those days, if you were planning your wedding, you didn't factor in the Red Sox being in the World Series. That was going to happen. And so, people came to the ceremony, and it was very nice. And then we had the reception afterwards, and everybody went downstairs to watch the game on TV. My poor wife threw the bouquet and it landed on the floor. I mean, it was just awful. There was nobody there. But that's how my life has been interconnected with the Red Sox. Anyway, I have a lot of great stories about community journalism. So the best man at the wedding, Steve Tripoli, worked for years for National Public Radio. And he did a lot of fabulous stories, interesting stories. One of my favorites was doing a story on Cuban-American relations, economic relations years ago. In the early 1900s and into the century, Cuban cigars were made in Ybor City in Tampa. And you had cigar rollers, okay? And the cigar rollers were so involved in learning the craft and learning the skill that they hired men to come in and read the newspaper to them every day while they rolled cigars. That's how important information was to them. They knew it would better their lives. I don't think information is as important to people now as it was then. I'm not sure why that is. People are interested in opinion, they're interested in predictions. They don't really care about the information, but you can't have an intelligent opinion or make an intelligent prediction without information. And that's why there's so much wacky stuff out there, because there's no basis to fact to it. The world is full of flat earthers. And there's no way that, unfortunately, you're going to change that opinion. But that can be frustrating because there's a lot of conversation that is not based in fact. And it's like the Red Sox had a general manager named Dan Duquette years ago who didn't like to deal with us. And what he would do was if you said, Dan, what time is it? His answer would be meatloaf. Well, there's no way, you can't go anywhere with that. And that's what we have today. You can't go anywhere with some of the responses that we get. And I mentioned how we had two papers in Gardner, we had two papers in Clinton. There were two papers in South. There were two papers all over the place in Central Mass, and everybody knew a lot. Everybody knew everything. And it was not minutia, but it was the details of life. It was cross-country results. It was planning board meetings. It was sewer commission meetings. All this stuff was there. And you could get the information and decide and make an opinion from that. And information is incredibly valuable, and I think it's lost its value right now. So I was glad to be here. Amy asked me, I was glad to come up. I like being around journalists, so that's fun for me. And I like being in a community where people think that information is important. And obviously this is. I'm so happy to see everybody here. Now, I'll talk about the Red Sox. Let me put this Hall of Fame ballot on the table. If you want to pass it around, pass it around. Don't fill it out. Because if you do, I'll have to hire a handwriting expert to track you down and make sure. But it's a very simple ballot. And if you have questions afterwards, you're welcome to ask me. But that is the most controversial thing I'll do over the course of the year, is vote for the Hall of Fame. So Red Sox coverage. Well, I started in 1987, which was, you remember the year after 1986, which was the horrible, horrible loss to the Mets in that World Series. Everybody in 1987 was in a bad mood. You'd walk into the locker room and everybody was in a bad mood, and it was a hard team to cover. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to do this anymore because 87 was such a miserable experience. We get into 1988 and they're lousy again, and they fire John McNamara, the nasty, ill-tempered manager, and replace him with Joe Morgan, who was the nicest man in the world, and who I knew because he had played amateur baseball in the backside in Whitensville. And he, when Susie found out from Whitensville, I was the greatest guy in the world. And Joe managed for 3.5 years, wonderful years. And Joe was 93. He's the third oldest living former baseball manager. And I talked to him like once a week. I talked to him yesterday, and he has the mind of like a 23-year-old. He remembers incredible details from games years and years ago. And now with computers, you can go back and research those games, and he's always right. It's amazing. He's just a great resource, and I love that. And I wound up staying till 2018. And I had a lot of fun doing it. You know, baseball is good years and bad years. The Red Sox aren't very good right now, and I tell everybody, they'll get better. Be patient. This is the way it goes. Same with the Patriots. They're lousy now. They were great for 20 years. Nobody wins all the time, so just bear with it. Sports fans tend to be impatient, so people are not bearing with it. But that was, you know, that's just the nature of sports. And I saw great years and bad years. Most people are interested in knowing about 2004 when they finally won the World Series. Those 2 years, 2003, 2004, were the most intense years I spent covering the Sox because they had great teams both years. One year they lose in hideous fashion to the Yankees, and a year later they win in unbelievable fashion to the Yankees. It shows you how fast things change. My memory of the 2003 season, my most vivid memory of that, was they play Game 7, and it looks like they're going to win, and they wind up losing on Aaron Boone's home run in extra innings, and all of a sudden, you got to rewrite everything in 15 minutes. It's one of these blow your brains out things. And so we have to get downstairs to the Red Sox locker room to talk to the players and Grady Little, the manager. And the old Yankee Stadium had 2 elevators. It had one for George Steinbrenner and the VIPs, and with a policeman in there. And if you blundered into that by mistake, the cuffs are on and you were off to the precinct. I mean, you didn't go there. The other was for the press. And obviously there was a lot of press there, you know, dozens and dozens. We had to go down the elevator in shifts to get in. And I was on the 3rd shift. And we all get in, we're squeezed in, and the door won't close. There's a hand, the door won't close. There's a hand, the door won't close. Finally, a gentleman steps in, a large gentleman steps in. It's Donald Trump. Instead of waiting for the other elevator, he gets into our elevator. And because it's overweight now, the elevator doesn't move. And the elevator said, someone's got to get out of here. And Trump did not move. 2 other reporters had to leave so we could go down to the locker room. And guys got in trouble because by the time we get down there, a lot of the players were gone. But that was my, you know, I've met 3 presidents, and he was one of them. And if you told me at some point that he was going to be president, I think I would have left. I would have been gone. So anyway, 2004, and the other, Amy, you know this from New York City. The great thing about that was we got done writing at 3 o'clock in the morning, and only in New York can you go out and get a corned beef sandwich and a beer at 3 in the morning. And we needed our beer and our sandwiches. So I got one at a corner deli, and everything was okay. And then it was back on the train to Worcester the next day. 2004 comes along, and you know they have a great season, but apparently they're going to lose to the Yankees in 3 games. They lose Game 3, I think it was 19-8. It was awful. It was like being at a funeral. And Game 4 comes along, and they win on David Ortiz's dramatic home run in extra innings. And you know, people ask me how players I like or don't like, or how you don't. It's hard to get involved in these things because the home run Ortiz hit to win that game came off a Toronto pitcher named Paul Quantrill, whose career started with the Red Sox. Paul Quantrill is one of my best friends in baseball. He's the nicest guy in the world. So yeah, it's exciting, but boy, I feel bad for this guy. He's going to have to live with this for the rest of his life, Paul Quantrill. So you've got to be careful in where your allegiances are because eventually one of your friends is going to beat you. That's just the nature of sports. But it was an exciting game, and then they go on, they win, and it's funny. The Red Sox win to make it 3-1. No one's ever come back from 3-0. And then they win the next night on another Ortiz hit to make it 3-2. And because I was friendly with the Yankees, Quantrill, the backup catcher John Flaherty, I was friendly with several of those guys. I would go talk to them. And after it was 3-2, I could see the fear in their eyes. We're going to lose this thing. We know we're going to lose this thing. The first team in history. And it happened. And you can see that in their eyes. We're going to lose this. And baseball is like that. Somehow things happen the way you think they're going to happen. You don't know why, but you can think yourself into victory. You can think yourself into defeat. And the Yankees thought themselves in defeat. And so the Red Sox win this, winning in this dramatic comeback. And to the Yankees' credit, as competitive they are, as what Steinbrenner is like. So the Red Sox win Game 7 in Yankee Stadium, and fans are there cheering. The Yankees let the fans stay there as long as they wanted to cheer. They didn't kick them out. They didn't kick him out. Stay as long as you want. This is your moment, which I thought was very classy. So we go to St. Louis. The Red Sox win the first 2 games at home, and then they go to St. Louis. And I took my wife with me. I couldn't get her tickets for the games. Took my wife with me, and I knew this was going to be a good weekend because I always would rent the cheapest car available at the agency because they always upgraded you. They never had the cheapest car. So I go to get this. Oh, we don't have that. We'll have to upgrade you. We wound up driving a bright orange Mustang convertible. Around St. Louis. I thought, oh, this is good. You know, in fact, we drove as much as we possibly could that day. If this is going to be a good weekend. Sure enough, they win Game 3, and they have a chance to sweep. And we're going. I said, my wife is not at the games. She's at the hotel listening to the game or watching on TV at the bar. And it gets me the 9th inning. They're ahead 3-0. And my wife is very calm. She's very, very reasonable, very calm. And a woman from St. Louis sitting next to her said, the Red Sox are going to win. Why aren't you jumping up and down? And she said, you don't know the Red Sox, do you? Yes, exactly. And so when it got to the last at batter, Edgar Renteria, I called my wife and I said, it looks like the Red Sox might win. You can't be here, but maybe you'd like to listen to when it happens. And I just held the phone out, and the next pitch, it was Renteria ground ball to Folk. Folk goes to Minkiewicz. The Red Sox win the World Series for the first time in 86 years. And I remember saying, my God, the Red Sox just won the World Series. Sorry, man, I got to work. And I put the phone down, and then you work. And then, you know, you're on deadline. In fact, it's a tough deadline because in St. Louis, there's an hour's time difference. So, you know, everything's happening later. I remember I didn't realize the enormity of what I saw until like 2 hours after the game. It was all done my work. I just saw the Red Sox win the World Series, something that nobody in New England ever thought they would see. And it was a tremendous moment. Because the game, it could have been a Game 5, we had, I rented the airline tickets had an extra day on them. We didn't want to come back early, so we had the day off, and we just drove around Missouri in that orange convertible. And it was a wonderful time, and we headed home, and it was historic there. So it's been a great life. I couldn't have imagined it would be better than it was. My favorite sport is actually hockey. In fact, yesterday, what's today the 6th, the 6th, December 4th, 2 days ago, was the 54th anniversary of my wife and I's first date. Wow. And it was to a pro hockey game. And I love hockey, but baseball is the best sport to write about because the tapestry is endless. It goes back to if you saw a videotape of a baseball game played in 1845, you'd recognize it as baseball. Football, you couldn't. Basketball wasn't invented. Hockey wasn't, but baseball has changed very little in that amount of time. And the stories and everything are just fabulous. That was always the best part about covering baseball was the stories. They were endless. Joe Morgan, my friend the manager, had stories that you just couldn't, they would go on and on and on and on. And you check with the people involved and they were always right there, accurate. Just fabulous. He couldn't do this in the major leagues because the major leaguers are a little sensitive. But he was managing the minor leagues. And he managed AAA baseball in Pawtucket. That was before he got to the Red Sox. His salary was $23,000 a year. They didn't make much money in those days, especially in the minors. But when a pitcher was really, really bad, he wouldn't go up to the mound to take him out. He'd stand at the top of the dugout and wave him in. Come on in there. And the pitcher, I'm terrified. He's going to wave me in. But that's what he would do. He couldn't do that in the majors, but he had all these wonderful stories, all of which turned out to be true. And that was the thrill of baseball. So that's about what I have to say about it. I generally go into questions because everybody has questions, and I'll answer them the best I possibly can. And and having covered sports for years, if you don't like what's going on, feel free to boo. It's all right. I will get the message. So feel free to do that. Otherwise, if you have a question, I'll do my best to answer it. Yes.
So on the Hall of Fame thing,
yeah.
How do you deal with the steroid?
Interesting. I should have been a lawyer because I'm very legalistic. There's a guy in the Hall of Fame named Gaylord Perry who admittedly threw a spitball, which is against the rules. He's in the Hall of Fame. I can't parse the cheating. I mean, if it's okay for him, it's okay for somebody else. And a lot of the cheating is suspected, not proven. And baseball now has guys like Alex Rodriguez, who I vote for, who has been caught with the steroids, has tested positive. Baseball has penalized him. Baseball has a penalty for that. It's not being in the Hall of Fame. It's a suspension. Baseball decided he's eligible for the Hall of Fame. If he's eligible, he certainly is a player that's worthy of being in the Hall of Fame. So that's how I handle it. Eventually, that's going to, with the testing the way it is now, there will be nobody left to vote for that may have taken steroids or something. It's been hard. I've always voted for Roger Clemens, who's now off the ballot. I vote for Manny Ramirez. Same thing. Baseball's decided what the punishment is. It is not the death penalty like it is for Pete Rose. So I do vote for them. I try to be consistent with that as well. Yes.
Yeah, I've always had a resentment against Charlie Finley, like lowering the pitcher's mound,
Yeah.
I thought he was evil. I've come to terms with that. But what do you think about, I don't know how I feel about the new rules, the speed it up,
The speed, it's a good point. I'm very much a traditionalist, and I don't like the ghost runners at second base. If the game goes 16, 18, that's fine. It's interesting. Let me digress. Can I digress, Amy? Yeah. All right, thank you. Where the Worcester Red Sox played, the longest game in baseball history, 32 innings, which Joe Morgan managed. And the umpire in that game was from Webster, Massachusetts. Anyway, the 32-inning game, longest game in baseball history. They have that, the line score like this on one of the walls near the visitor's batting cage. It's like this long. And every so often, visiting players will stop there and say, 32 innings? It's like, 11's enough for me. I mean, that's how much the world has changed. I don't like that. I do believe that the pitch clock had to come in because it was being abused. It's like, if you take away the speed limit, you're going to have guys going 100. All right, you got to reel it back. You had guys like Clay Buchholz taking 2 minutes to throw a pitch, and it really slowed the game down. I remember covering Red Sox-Yankees games that went 6 hours. It was terrifying. It was terrible. I don't like replay. The game is played by human beings, and that's part of its appeal. It's played by human beings. I don't like replay. I know officials, be it umpires or referees, they're imperfect. But as long as they're fair-minded, and they all are, they make mistakes evenly. The thing is, you only remember the ones that go against you. I mean, when they introduced video replay to hockey, when I was doing Worcester, I kept track of the replays through a course of a season, 82 games, and at the end of the year, it was exactly 50-50. They won as many appeals as they lost. In the long run, it doesn't make a difference. So I'm against that. I understand the pitch clock. It really had to happen because it was being abused. It was. You just had to put a lid on it somewhere. But I'd rather see the long games going. I miss those 20-inning games. I've covered a few, and I'm always glad when they're over. But you sing a bit of history when you see that. Yeah.
27-inning game once at Fenway.
27 innings?
27. Yeah.
That's a long game. They had, when baseball first started, they played till someone scored 100 runs. They were like 4-day games. It was unbelievable. Fortunately, that's been changed. Yeah. Yes.
Do you have colleagues who, in sports, who have also covered other news? And how well do they do at it?
No. Not when I was there. They all started out at small papers and covered sports all the way up. I'm the only one I know of that made the switch from news to sports. And I like news. And it's funny, I'm not a scientific sports fan. I don't care about the hits and runs and RBIs or the touchdown passes. I care about the stories that they create, the competition creates. That's the interesting part of it for me. Obviously, the games are interesting, but I was never a balls and strikes, wins and losses, who's going to be traded guy. I like to write about the color of the sports. That's why the Telegram was good. The Boston papers, you have to be on every single thing, every trade, every this. I was not interested in that. I was interested in the stories that they all created, and probably coming from news helped with that. But I'm the only guy I know of that actually started off in news. I mean, I was a sports editor in Amherst, my first job, but then I went into news with the Telegram, and when the Red Sox thing opened up, I applied, and I was lucky enough to get it. Yeah. Yes?
So what's a baseball writer do in the off season?
I do hockey. I did hockey. But before the hockey team came in, I did, you spend a lot of time, I mean, there's trades and stuff you write about, but you spend a lot of time taking phone calls with basketball scores and stuff like that. I mean, I was always glad when that was over. And then the reward was, in February, you got to go to spring training. So a couple months you spent inside, that's all right. I'll be at spring training in North. Spring training was always interesting. It's very relaxed. When I first started in 87, 89, It was so relaxed that we were allowed to go sit in the bullpen with the relief pitchers and talk to them during the game. You know, that's how relaxed it was. Now, if they saw you doing that, they'd have you shot. It's an entirely different thing it was. But yeah, spring training was very relaxed. The games were mostly in the day. It was a lot of fun. And we would drive together to the different ballparks, the different sites. Yeah. Yes? Oh,
Regarding your voting for the Hall of Fame,
yeah.
how do you feel about defensive players that haven't gotten in, like Dwight Evans and Omar Vizquel?
Well, you're going to hate me. I'm against it. And here's why. And I'll tell you my criteria for voting for the Hall of Fame. When I was 7 years old, in 1959, my dad took me into Fenway Park, and he said, I want you to be able to tell your kids you saw Ted Williams play. Those guys aren't in that category. I mean, Vizquel was a great defensive player. Ozzie Smith is in because he was so sensational. You would buy a ticket to watch Ozzie Smith play. Vizquel was just incredibly steady and good, but I wasn't going to go out of my way to see him play. And I did this. I got a lot of grief from people in Seattle. I didn't vote for Edgar Martinez. I voted for Ortiz. You know, great DHs, but different levels. I mean, Ortiz, when he came up to bat, you put down your beer to see what was going to happen, because something was going to happen. Edgar Martinez was a nice player. I got an email from a guy in Seattle one time, and I always announce my vote in December, who said, I ranted and ranted for a while, and in the end said, I hope you have the most miserable Christmas of your life. You get nothing under the tree and you suffer. Okay, thank you. You may be taking this a bit too seriously, but I mean, you have a right to your opinion. But yes, I get some of that. And my best friend on the beat, a guy named Steve Krasner, who worked for Providence, who played varsity baseball at Columbia, a good player, feels Vizquel should be in the Hall of Fame as well. So you're not alone in that. He's just not of that level for me. Yeah. But it's a good question, yeah.
Right over there.
Oh, yes.
My question is involved three things that I'm going to say.
Yeah.
Sports gambling, Pete Rose, and the Hall of Fame.
Okay. First of all, Pete Rose is not on the ballot, so we've never had the chance to vote for him. Theoretically. And the reason he's not on the ballot is because gambling, the famous Black Sox scandal of 1919, almost killed baseball. People started thinking it was pro wrestling. It was rigged. Actually, I got a side here. Can I digress again? One of my good friends who worked for the Boston Globe for years and years and years was a great baseball writer. However, he believed that pro wrestling was on the level. I mean, we always had this debate, but he believed it was on the level. Anyway, and baseball players know when they become baseball players, if you gamble, you're done. That's a death penalty. They know that. Now, I had a very good friend in baseball who was an expert in paramute and thoroughbred racing. And he played for Pete Rose. I promised I would never say who it was because it'd be easy to track it back to him. But he knew, so he knew thoroughbred racing well. And parimutuel betting is and always has been legal. But Pete Rose told him at one point in his career, if you keep giving me good racing tips, I'm going to keep you on my team. That tells me that affected his managing. You know, it's not how good you are, how good are your racing tips. That affected his managing, so that's why I would never vote for Pete Rose. At least the guys that use steroids, they're trying to get better and make their team, help their team win. But Pete Rose really didn't care. He just wanted the good racing tips. So that's why I'm against Pete Rose.
What about sports betting now? It's legal.
It is legal, but it wasn't legal then, and he knew it then. Sports betting is, it's awful. You watch something on TV, and all you see are the odds. I don't care what the odds are. The odds are useless. In 2004, what were the odds the Red Sox were going to beat the Yankees after going down by 3 games? Not too good. But anyway, I don't like sports gambling. It is legal now. The other thing that was to Rose's detriment was the Richard Nixon effect. If he come out and said, I did it, geez, I'm sorry, it was really stupid, but he lied about it for 30 years, and I think that has hurt him as well. It's just like you did it and you lied about doing it. That's hurt him. Now that he's gone, I don't know. He's still off the ballot, and every commissioner says he's never going to be on the ballot. That could change with a commissioner. I don't see that happening in my lifetime. Yeah, but that's a very interesting point. There's a very open debate on that. Rose, obviously, his accomplishments are Hall of Fame accomplishments. It is the other stuff that isn't, and that complicates the matter quite a bit. Yeah, character is one of the things that we have to consider when we vote. And there's some bad people in the Hall of Fame, but they didn't gamble on the games.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm going to put you on the spot.
Yes.
Dustin Pedroia.
Okay, I haven't written this yet, and that's I dreaded seeing. I knew he was going to be there. I dreaded seeing that because he has a lot of fans, and he and I had a good relationship. Pedroia, very intense guy, and he would always say hi, but he didn't have time for conversation because he had something to do, and we understood that. I mean, it's a tough life. No, not good enough. Not good enough. I would not buy a ticket to see Justin Pedroia play. And you know what hurts him, and it's too bad, he wound up hitting .299 for his career. He came back for one last year, giving it a try. He went 0 for 12. If he had had 2 less at bats, he would have batted .300 for his career. He was like 299.4 is what his final average was. So yeah, I'm going to get a lot of grief on that too. It'll be interesting to see how much support he gets outside. A fine player, his career a bit too short. Bill Mazeroski's in the Hall of Fame. He was in by the Veterans Committee. I wouldn't have voted for him either. He's just not that kind of guy. Not a David Ortiz, not a Pedro Martinez. Ichiro's on the ballot. Ichiro absolutely is in all the way. Derek Jeter. There were guys that are so obvious that it's easy. When they send me, and I have a packet there, they send me the stats of all these guys. I don't look at them. I know the good players. They're on the ballot. If they weren't good players, they wouldn't be on the ballot. It's a gut instinct thing. Just how dynamic were they? And dynamic is something you can't create by taking extra batting practice or things like that. The classic example is Ortiz. When he came up in the playoffs, it was an event. Or Pedro Martinez, when he pitched, it was an event. Louis Tiant, I voted for him when he was eligible. He didn't get in. He was an event when he pitched. There aren't many guys like that. And there are fewer and fewer now because pitchers only pitch 6 innings. Right. And that's a problem. So yeah, that's not an easy call, but it's maybe 3 or 4 more great years he would have done it, but it was just not enough. Just not enough. And I can't wait to get the email on that. Yes?
Yeah, you were saying at the beginning, that people's interest in information, you find that writing about sports makes it easier because you've got actual statistics?
You do have a lot of information, yes. And all of this is, everything that people do in sports is built off the box score. Baseball is built off the box score. You can't invent the box score. It is what it is. And everything goes, remember John Lackey pitched for the Red Sox? He pitched for the Angels before the Red Sox. Real jerk. And I remember the Red Sox beat the Angels, I think in the 2004 playoffs, and Lackey said, well, the best team didn't win. No, it did. That's the definition of the best team. They win. That'd be like running a 100-yard dash and you finish 5 yards behind. The best runner didn't win. Oh, no, he did win. That's the definition of that. So that's the beauty of baseball and all sports. The box score doesn't lie. You know what it is. And that builds, everything builds from there. It does. And that's the beauty of, one of the beauties of sports is that it's less subjective than anything else. That's why, another thing people drive me crazy, like the Olympics. I don't think gymnastics should be an Olympic sport. It's judged. A 100-yard dash, you know who won. You see the guy. This other thing, it's a judgment. I don't know. I can't tell the difference between this one and that one. They're all good. I think it should be a direct competition. The results are measurable. Olympic basketball, you know who wins the game, who scores the most points. Anyway, I'm old-fashioned and cranky, and people hate me. So that's all right. What else?
I'll ask a non-baseball question.
Yeah.
Is Whitensville, is that a news desert now?
Yes, in fact, it's terrible. One of my best friends, the guy I grew up with is in Whitensville, is on the board of directors of the Whitensville Water Company. And unbeknownst to anybody, because it hasn't been published, the town dump is leaking. And people living there, their wells have been poisoned. They have to get water from the town trucked in, and it's heading toward the river. So it's a heck of a story. Not a word about it in the papers. Not a word. Wow. And all you have to do is go to a meeting because it's in the public. Not a word. We changed police chiefs 2 years ago. Not a word. We noticed there's a big crowd at the police station. Wants to introduce a new police chief. Yeah. So yes, it's worse than it's the Antarctica of news. I mean, there's nothing living there at all. Yeah. It's very discouraging. It is a news desert. Yeah. We have all these shoppers. They have ads. They put in politicians' press releases, and that's the news. Yeah, it is discouraging. Yes, way down there.
Do you think that baseball's dying?
No, baseball. How many people here have watched The Godfather? All right, a lot of you. Baseball is the Hyman Roth of The Godfather. He's been dying of the same heart attack for 20 years. Baseball's been dying of the same heart attack for 140 years. There's more competition now, obviously, but it's not dying. Last year, here's an example. When I was growing up, Red Sox tickets good tickets were $3, okay? And they drew about 1.8 million people a year, okay? Now the tickets are $200 and they draw 2.8 million people a year. So no, it's not dying. It's not dying. It's had its peaks. I think 2003, 4, 5, that era, it was through the roof. And it's come back a bit, but it hasn't come back a lot. I have a friend, when Debbie and I were first married, our next door neighbors had just been married. We lived in Amherst. And I became a poor but fun sports writer. He became a wealthy investor. And he owns a chunk of the Chicago White Sox, which that's not that good, but anyway, it's a Major League Baseball team. And he was telling me the last financial report from 2 years ago, the White Sox lost $54 million, profit and loss, but the value of the franchise went up by $80 million. So baseball's not dying. I mean, these teams are selling for billions of dollars now, so it's not dying. Yes, again?
It's not in the Olympics, right?
No.
Why?
I don't know. Why is the biathlon in the Olympics? When's the last time you saw someone go by shooting a deer while they're on skis? And this is Maine. None of this makes any sense to me. Why isn't golf in the Olympics? Exactly.
It is in the Olympics.
It is now. It hasn't been for a long time. And baseball was in for a while. I don't know why some of these sports are. And what do they have these crazy things where people flip around on skateboards? Yeah, it baffles me. I agree. Why is it? I don't know. Yes?
So given that the reports of baseball is dying are greatly exaggerated, what advice would you give to a young person who wanted to enter the field of sports journalism and focus on that?
You've got to, it's interesting. I noticed that, people who work for the paper here, obviously it's printed, but the publication here, tend to be older, all right? And mature, they're mature, which is good in many ways.
Why?
Well, because you have a lot of good stories to tell. I couldn't have told these stories at 22.
And then wisdom.
Wisdom. I remember, I did a story on old guys who played in the senior hockey league, and one of the top goal scorers was a college hockey goalie at Boston University, real good goalie. And I said, why don't you still play goal? And he said, with age comes wisdom. And you're right about that. So where did getting into sports journalism. You've got to start a small local paper like this. You have to, the thing about getting a job in newspapers, Amy, you can back me up or not, you've got to have clippings. You've got to be able to show that you can do this. There's a lot of people that can do it. So it's not easy. But you have to be able to get an internship. Work for free. I mean, it's, my first job in Amherst, I made $90 a week. This is 1974. That was almost working for free. But after a while, you move up. That's what you do. You find some place where you can write and you have evidence of what you can do, and that's where you start. That's I get a lot of questions about this all the time. It's not easy like when I was there. There were lots of papers around to start at. Now there's nowhere near as many papers to start at, or online outlets. It's just tough. But you have to have something to show people. This is what I wrote. This is my name. Look what I can do. Yes.
Which sports writers do you read, or did you?
I read. It's interesting. Growing up, I thought the greatest sports writer of all time is Red Smith, who hated editors, because Red Smith one time wrote this fabulous line. Some guy had lost something, and Red Smith wrote, he had the look on his face of a man who had just bitten into an apple and found half a worm. Well, the editor changes to found a worm. That's entirely different than what Red Smith did. Yes. But Red Smith, he was just just an artist with words. He was great. Ray Fitzgerald of the Globe was funny that way, and Ray Fitzgerald was funny without being mean. He was just a funny guy. I always read him. Peter Gammons in baseball, I read him. I'm not a big basketball fan, but I know Bob Ryan's been very good, and Bob Ryan is a good friend of mine because he's equally knowledgeable in baseball. Bob Ryan has literally a photographic memory. If you ask him, what he had for breakfast on July 2nd, 1973. Oh, I had scrambled eggs. I don't know if it was rye toast or white toast, but he remembers that. We went to the Carlton Fisk Hall of Fame induction in Cooperstown several years ago. Bob was there. And someone had a question about something, about the great game where he hit the home run to win the game. And Bob's, I have the scorebook right here. And they looked it up. I mean, a wonderful, just an incredible encyclopedia of knowledge of not just basketball, but like everything he's ever seen. And he was great. And he's a very, very lively writer. Dan Shaughnessy, I read all the time. Shaughnessy's very contrarian, but you need that. I mean, you don't want someone doing the company. He's very contrarian, very, very clever, funny guy. I read him religiously. Of Chris Gasper of the Globe is very good now. And those are the ones. Those are the main ones. The New York Times doesn't have its own sports section anymore. It's now gone to the Athletic. But the days of the really gifted writers who can paint word pictures, they're going out of style. They're going out of style. The Globe at one time had Lee Montville. Lee Montville was just a genius. Lee Montville, they all have great lines. One of my favorite Lee Montvilles was back when the Bruins played at the old Boston Garden. I'd covered some Bruins games, and it was like going to Walpole State Prison. I mean, the crowd there was guys with sweatpants and gravy on it. It was just awful. And there was something going on, some sort of a bride or something. And Montville, isn't that always the way? The 7,000 bad ones ruined it for the 2,000 good ones. And he came up with it. Lee Montville was one of those guys, if he wrote a column about the value of one kind of ketchup versus the next, you'd read every word because he was such a craftsman. Nothing he wrote was dull. He was just brilliant. So Montville and the Globe had Montville, Gammons, Ryan, right, all these guys all together at the same time. It was just heavenly, it really was. So yes, there were writers that I read them and say, I'm jealous. I wish I could write that well. But not many people can write that well. But the Globe was fabulous. And Red Smith, I got to sit next to Red Smith one time. Yogi Berra's son Tim played, I went to UMass. Yogi Berra's son Tim played football at UMass. And Yogi would come up to the games. I remember one time my father say, hey, the guy sitting next to me looked just like Yogi Berra. Hey, no one looks just like Yogi Berra. That's Yogi Berra. And Tim was an incredible way. He could catch anything that came within 10 yards of him, but he couldn't run. I remember one time he returned a kickoff 102 yards and didn't get a touchdown because he took it 4 yards deep and got knocked out of bounds at the 2 of all of that. But Red Smith came to UMass one time to write a story about Yogi and Tim, so I get to sit next to him. So that was a real thrill as well. He might be the best. Yes, are we done?
I'm going to suggest one more question, and then because we have another speaker.
Oh,
and
geez.
then people can stay and answer questions.
For a price.
How about a bed tonight?
That's good. Yeah, that's very good. I was going to sleep in the car. That's fine. One more question then, and I'll be around.
What do you think about Fenway? Should they keep it?
Yes, I'm a traditionalist. You know, Fenway was built in 1912. What year was the Massachusetts State House built? 17. It's still there. It's working fine. Fenway's working fine. If Fenway, people vote with their feet. If Fenway was such a trouble place to go to a game, nobody would go to the game. It's very simple. Everybody goes to the game. So yeah, keep it up. It's unique. All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Here's my ballot. There we go.
Don't give it to him,
That's just delightful.
Thank you.
The next thing we're going to have is Maya Srinivasan is going to come up. And she's going to talk about why she supports the reporter.
Hello, everyone. This is like the best town ever. And it doesn't surprise me that a town like this would come up with something like the South Berwick Reporter. So seeing the people who are involved here tonight is so just wonderful because this town comes up with great stuff all the time. And I really am so interested in everything going on in town, but I often can't be at the meeting or at the event that would inform me for what I need to know. And when I started to hear about the concept of this newspaper, I was like, I feel like I'm pretty well informed. I don't really see why that's super important. And then it started coming out, and very quickly it became a staple for me. And now I rely on it, and I think it's absolutely essential. And how lucky that we have this so close to home. I was at a social event, and I was sitting beside Trish, and I said, I wish it came at 6 in the morning instead of 8, because by 8 I'm already busy, and I can't read it, and then it gets shuffled to the side. The next morning, it came at 6. So how could we not support that?
Yeah.